Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on soft skills in procurement. Today, we're not talking about technology, we're not talking about AI, we're talking about people. And we want to actually figure out how can we as procurement practitioners become better business partners. So for the next hour, that's the whole topic. We want to talk about what it is that makes them important, what the most important ones are, and what you can do yourself or as a team in order to improve your soft skills and become better business partners. So we have brought together a very interesting panel, set of panelists that really can talk about this topic from different angles. So we have brought together procurement practitioners, recruitment leaders, as well as soft skill coaches in order to really look at this particular topic from all the different angles. If you have any questions during the session, please post them in the Q&A. We have secured some time at the very end in order to then cover those off. But without further ado, let's jump straight in it. And in order to make sure that everybody knows who's around, let's do a quick round of introductions. And ladies first, Angharad, would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Thank you very much. Good to see you all. Thanks for having me. My name's Angharad Kenwood. I'm the managing partner of 09. For those of you who don't know 09, we are a talent solutions business within the procurement sector. I've been in the general recruitment space in procurement for nearly 20 years. Bit geeky about the profession, which is a bit sad, but you know, it's the truth. I feel very invested in the future of the function and also driving some of the conversation that's ongoing at the moment. I'm also an avid kind of female business leader, mum of twins, and you know, super passionate about kind of learning and developing and challenging as well. So really appreciate you having me on today.
Thanks for joining us, and I will definitely come back to some questions around what the job profile needs to look like right now in order to get a job. And if you're looking for a job, which as we know, 50% of all people always are, now you have the right person to reach out to. So,
Absolutely.
Alison.
I was one of the few people, it would seem, that was told by the career advisor 40 years ago, procurement's for you. So procurement is still what I'm passionate about. So procurement for 40 years, soft skills for 25 years, and a consultant working for future purchasing and working with Mark Hubbard, who does the L&D director for future purchasing, about how can we make sure that we've got soft skills in alongside the technical skills? And I'm sure we'll get onto the why behind that later.
Perfect. And it's a really interesting statement because my HR partner told me at the time, "Are you crazy?" So I think we could have an entire panel discussion just around the difference in those two responses. Perfect. Thanks for joining us, Alison. And last but not least, Neno.
Thank you, Fabian. Nice to meet you all. So I'm also a long-time procurement professional, been in procurement for 20 years, currently work for Teva Pharmaceutical, leading source-to-pay development on a global level. Basically, my background is category management and strategic sourcing. I covered as a category director or category manager a lot of different categories, from direct to indirect to capital equipment in pharma, in FMCG. And this is why I developed understanding why soft skills really matter. It is almost impossible to move things in procurement in any more complex project without having soft skills. So basically, I'm coming from a slightly different angle than the rest of you. I'm interested really in how to apply soft skills to move forward with category management and strategic sourcing.
And I mean, as future purchasing is obviously extremely specialized on category management, I might see a fit right there. But you're also the one that will be able to help us bridge the kind of perspectives from both the person that is looking after tools and technology and can tell us a little bit about why that is so prominent right now, as well as why technology alone might just not be the answer. Perfect. Thanks for joining us as well. So now that we know who's in the room, we have another good 30 people with us as well. Let's jump in it. And I would say training as a topic sometimes has a bit of a kind of feeling to it for some people, for whatever reason, for multiple reasons, really. But we have been training team members on a broad range of topics for a very long time. Soft skills, on the other hand, or behavioral skills, how they are also sometimes referred to, have not necessarily been a big part of the training agenda. Neno, can you quickly talk a little bit about why have we trained what we have trained in the past? And maybe Alison, you can then jump in on that as well.
Yeah, usually procurement was mostly focused on training for technical skills. And if you are looking into soft skills training, these are usually either instructor-led workshops that they can be either on-site or virtual. They are, I would say, still are mostly focused on negotiation. However, more and more I can see communication and relationship management trainings. The second most common type of training is your internal company LMS platforms. Some companies develop internal trainings. And LinkedIn Learning, I found LinkedIn Learning to be very helpful in this area. These are usually self-paced modules which are combined with live sessions for practical application. And then the last type of training that I don't think that we are using enough in procurement is mentoring and coaching, which is tailored specifically for category managers and sourcing specialists. I don't think that procurement is really using mentoring and coaching enough. And what we are really lacking is connection with different functions in the organization, which might be a bit more advanced than procurement. So mentoring from your colleagues in the marketing department, in sales department, especially when we talk about things like storytelling, there are functions within the company that are a lot better in storytelling than procurement is. Why don't you use what you already have in the house and try some of that? So this is the kind of the training landscape that I see currently.
And I think within that, this technical or function specific training has had the majority share. So I remember in 10 years of actually being a practitioner, I received one negotiation training, one category management training, one supplier management training, and I had a side gig with like a 360, which brought a couple of the softer elements in. Why is that changing now? Angharad, Alison, like what is your take on that?
Do you want to jump in, Alison? I don't want to interrupt you.
I think the complexity comes to mind. The fact that if I look back 40 years, it wasn't as complex as it is now. And therefore, I think creative thinking, clarity is something that we're needing in order to make sense of that clarity, confusion and complexity. But I also think most of the problems are human made. It's like misalignment of expectations, distrust, ineffective communication. They're not things that AI can actually necessarily help you with. So I think there's more of an emphasis on tackling the problems that we're seeing, not least because we're trying to do more collaborative work with our stakeholders. And therefore, some of those skills are much more needed now than they were perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think, obviously this is not an AI technology webinar. We know that. But it's very much there at the moment, and certainly something that everybody's talking about, slightly to death, if you ask me, but definitely it's there. And what I'm seeing in the community that I'm tapped into, and this is coming from very senior people as well, is that there's a fear that procurement's no longer needed, and people are slightly lost and they don't really know what direction to go in. But what we are seeing is this real shift in sort of commercial kind of business partnering, really going out to the business and helping to set the strategy and again, back to that human piece, to build those credible relationships that actually you can't get out of a textbook, to be honest. You can't learn it from a workshop. It's actually kind of you know, inherent behavior, but also, like you said, Fabian, it's learning from the people around you. And, you know, you said the same thing, the coaching, the mentoring, the taking the best bits from the great people that you sit with every day, whether that's in person or virtually, and kind of developing that sort of human toolkit. But, you know, it's not been spoken about enough. It's definitely underinvested in. And actually, there's been way too much focus, in my opinion, on some of the kind of technical nitty-gritty skills that actually lots of people already have. It's the other stuff that maybe they don't have the confidence in. And this kind of fear of technology that's kind of underpinning everything is really tapping into the confidence level in the profession at the moment. And what we need to see is more investment, not underinvestment. But you know, that's a whole nother topic that we could probably spend all day on.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So, I mean, like when I work with future purchasing, like we have now over the last couple of months just really refocused or re-established what the different pillars are. There's the functional knowledge, there is then the soft or behavioral knowledge, and now I think more than it has 5 years ago, even 2 years ago, there's the digital capabilities. And so all three of them are obviously important in different degrees to different roles that we have. And some of them, I would argue, well, everybody needs to have the basics, and in others, people need to have a black belt, but only a very selected few. Nevertheless, I think we moved on, like everybody always immediately says, functional skills, perfectly fine, no problem. Digital skills over the last 3 to 5 years, I would say, have achieved the same kind of position where everybody is okay, like, yep, if I want people to work with digital tools in a digital way, in a digital world, I need to give them a little bit of that. And digital literacy, AI literacy are big topics just in that bucket alone. Yet the behavioral skills, I think you have already mentioned at least 8 or 10 in the last 12 minutes. They still haven't achieved that. So I have 2 questions for that. First of all, and Alison, I would say you're the best position to answer that one, is what are soft skills in a broader sense with a couple of examples? And B, why have they not achieved that status? Like, why is that actually? And again, just I know there's no specific, like there's no statistical answer to that, but I would just like to understand what your perspective is on that.
My perspective is about the fact that soft skills are how we do what we do, whereas the technical skills are what we're doing. So what we're doing is we're writing a category strategy, we're doing business requirements, but the soft skills are how we actually use those tools to actually get the output. And that's why they're important, because they're how we get value out of that category strategy, that business requirements, etc. So for me, that's what they are. They're the how, and that we can't just go, here's the model, and ignore the soft skills that are required, which is why quite often if we're doing a business requirement element of a fairly technical workshop, we'll still be looking at, well, how are we going to facilitate the meeting? How are we going to weigh up and look at different opinions? How do we get consensus at the end? So in some respects, we're actually getting soft skills in under a technical banner, because everybody thinks they're talking about business requirements or even category strategy development. You know, the first question quite often in the workshop is, you know, whose is the document? And as soon as you say it's a business document, then it suddenly requires those soft skills to be put in place, because it requires that influencing, the communication, that storytelling, to actually get the business buy-in and get them involved in developing those category strategies.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think like they haven't achieved this kind of level of how to say that, this level of acceptance as a proper investment area for training?
For me, as a coach, most people are not aware of what they're not aware of. So they don't know what they don't know. And their level of self-awareness isn't so great. So we all go around the work, you know, go around operating how we would like to be spoken to, and assuming that how we see the world is how everybody else sees the world. And so it's only when they suddenly realize that, oh, you mean oh, you're not motivated by the same as me. It was an exercise we do where we ask people to sell the benefits of category management, and procurement quite often come up with the benefits, and they're there going, it's brilliant, this is what it's going to do for you. And they forget quite often, because it's not their preference, to talk about the problems it's going to resolve, what they're going to be moving away from. So I think for me, there's an element of self-awareness in all this, that as soon as we become more self-aware, then we suddenly realise, oh my God, there's more flexibility for us to adapt how we behave, dependent on the person we're talking to and the situation, rather than, and this is something we saw the other week, putting on a procurement sort of, what's it called, bad cop hat, and thinking that's how we actually have to operate all the time. Because I think it's that stereotype.
I also think, and don't worry, I'm not going to bring everything back to recruitment, but I do think some of this, the focus on soft skills, comes from the top, whether that be the culture of the organisation, the board, or actually the CPO themselves, in terms of the type of organisation they build and the type of people they bring in. And, you know, if I had £10 for every time a CPO says to me, I don't need 20 years of IT category management. What I need is the right soft skills, the right behaviours, the influencing skills, you know, someone that's engaging and the right culture fit for us. And then when it comes down to it, they go for the person with 20 years IT category management skills. And now I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but what I'm saying is that the focus on soft skills will not be there unless that comes down from the top, and we hire based on potential rather than just the technical skills. Obviously it's important, but it's got to be a melting pot of a skill set to make that person successful. And the challenge with that is we'll have lots of people that look and feel the same if we're not careful. And as the function evolves with technology, actually some of the functions will become outdated because of that.
I love the HR talk of like hiring for potential. Whenever I hear that, it makes me really feel like, I can see it. I can see it happen.
But does anybody do it? That's the question.
I don't think so.
No.
But so we have prepared a couple of questions to Paul, like during the webinar, so to keep it a little bit interactive as well. And obviously, don't forget there's a Q&A part. But Ian, if you wouldn't mind joining, like just sharing the first poll with us. And the question is, does your company provide dedicated training for obtaining soft skills relevant to procurement? Very simple. Yes, no. There's no, I got this, then it's a yes. If the answer is like, no, then it's just no. And we just wanted to have those, just to get a feeling for how relevant that is. Because if no, we're all saying, well, we all have training for that, then, all right. Mark, what do you think of that? And by the way, Mark is the director that Alison mentioned. He's the guy who's responsible for training and development at Future Purchasing.
Yeah, interesting split there. Very quick response. We've got 54% with no's on the dedicated training for soft skills being provided, 46% for yes. It'd be interesting to explore what type of soft skills training the yeses have got, but I guess that we can explore some of that later. The no's, I guess, reflects the challenges that we see on a regular basis, where soft skills often get sacrificed for other areas. The very small number of areas that procurement folk get trained in, soft skill is the one that gets sacrificed on a regular basis, which is ironic given change management and influencing stakeholders is probably the biggest challenge we all have anyway. But there we are, such is life.
And it's probably the biggest return on investment that you can get. So procurement teams will usually go after the negotiation training and the standard stuff, or try to throw the latest technology solution at it and completely ignore investing in training. So this is interesting result of the poll.
Well, actually, why? I mean, we don't have now more details on like, was it large companies that have it, small companies that don't have it? And again, we could go down that rabbit hole. But like, I think just the fact that it's almost a 50-50 is like really a hit or miss kind of signal to us. And I think, Angharad, I have a question for you on the HR on the full-on HR perspective later on, where I would like to get back to that a little bit. But before that, Neno, can you maybe talk a little bit? In your introduction, you already gave a little bit away that your role, you have a strong background in category management, and Alison, you mentioned category management and the importance of soft skills there. Can you actually dive a little bit deeper into that, Neno, and tell us a little bit more of why you think that is such an important one? And the reason I would like to hear about that is if we look at the future purchasing global category management report, like that has been released 6 times now. And by the way, there's a poll open for the 7th one. We will share that later on with you as well. There's one answer that always comes back, or one area that always comes back as being underwhelming, let's say, and that is soft skills, and a couple of examples within that. What can you just explain why in category management that particular point makes such a big difference?
Yeah, because most procurement battles and challenges are actually internal, Fabian. So they range from managing stakeholders to aligning procurement goals with broader business objectives, and this is where most procurement teams really stumble. And if you want to transition from a reactive approach to proactive one, this is very difficult without strong soft skills. So basically, you will get a lot of pressure both from the top, from the CPO or even supply chain or CEO, to develop long-term plans on procurement side which are aligned with business. Guess what? If you want to develop these type of plans, then you have to have really good stakeholder management and good communication skills. Yeah. So the most critical for me would be critical thinking, communication, stakeholder management. This is just to start your category management journey, basically to gather what really your business stakeholders are expecting from procurement. And I did an exercise like this when I worked at a consultancy, and it was a total eye-opener. However, what we approached it with a structured questionnaire. So we put a lot of structure, some structure in a questionnaire towards the business. We came into the room with a certain set of assumptions, what they expect from procurement. We got out of that room 4 days later with a totally different objectives for procurement, and this tells you why soft skills are important. The other thing what I found really important is storytelling. I would say procurement overall is not very good at storytelling, and if you want to get buy-in for the large transformational projects, you need to talk. You need to be able to tell procurement story from the business perspective. So that's my take on it.
Just a follow-up point. Like I think the point on business requirements and what procurement thinks the business wants, not necessarily being what the business tells it what it actually wants. I think that has been over the last 15 years for me been one of the most amazing disconnects. Now I do marketing and I do branding, and so I help people position themselves for something, right? And so therefore for me this is even more interesting, because the fact that procurement doesn't go out as a standard kind of operating principle once a year to have that conversation and alignment of what is the business strategy, where does the business want to go, what does that mean for procurement? Like, I never hear about it. I literally never have anybody come to me and be like, yeah, that's what we do. No problem. It's incredible.
It's very rare. So procurement will usually focus on the savings, cost avoidance, payment terms. And then you will go to your stakeholder in supply chain, and they will tell you regulatory, assurance of supply, etc. They really... And it's not that they don't care about cost savings, but it is at a different level of priority, and you have to put it into context with all other things that they expect from you. And this will totally change what you want to do with your sourcing strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I think even that statement, I'm always like, I love savings, I love negotiations, like I was always a sourcing and savings guy as well. And so therefore, for me, there's some companies in distress, like they don't care about all of that other soft stuff. So back to our discussion, and for them, savings might be the number one. But the whole point is, you need to go there, you need to talk to them, you need to find out, and then react accordingly instead of just assuming what it is that they want. So we have one more poll question. Ian, would you mind sharing the second poll before we actually make a transition into the HR perspective? Did you participate in a training? So we had the 50-50 split almost. Now this is only for the, well, I would expect that the people that said no, we don't have a training, say no here now as well, unless they just moved a job. But if your company is actually offering training, did you actually participate in it? Did you participate in training and coaching? Just in training? Did you actually get a coach? Like that would be really interesting because I think you made some statements earlier that especially the coaching part is a little bit underrepresented often. Perfect. Thank you very much for that. Mark, what do you make of those numbers?
So I think what we can see here is we are clearly got a bias where when something is happening, the thing that is happening is just training with very limited coaching happening, which supports Neno's point. And I think our experience in here is that if you do some training without doing some post-course activity of some sort, the chances of getting behavioural training are behavioural change are very limited. So there is a reality check here about when we're running training courses, do we actually set them up in a way that allow people to maximize the learning that they've got out of the training and then actually apply it in the workplace, which does often take a bit of coaching to get it to happen. And again, an observation would be that that's often because the mid-management layers are less interested in the coaching aspects of that they can do. The good ones are, of course, but there are many who don't seem to want to get involved in that. Kind of interesting.
And I think coaching in itself sometimes has a bit of a negative connotation that people actually think of it as something that is more I'm doing something wrong and that's why I'm getting a coach instead of hey, there's a way for you to even get better at what you're doing and that's why you're getting a coach. So I think that's also that might be a reason why people not actively seek out this kind of support for themselves. And I think that's that's very unfortunate.
It's actually fairly common in lots of other professions that people don't necessarily rely on their organization to provide a coach or a mentor, that they do seek out their own, but it's quite uncommon in the procurement profession. We ask most senior people and they don't have a coach or a mentor, and they've never actually gone out of their way to try and get one either, and this doesn't necessarily have to be paid for. It could be someone that's an ex-colleague that takes on the role of a mentor. And interestingly, we did a women's round table not so long ago, and out of that, most of the women in the room felt that they had the technical skills to progress, but not necessarily the confidence to navigate the next layer up, and therefore felt that they needed a coach or a mentor. So we've actually just launched a women in procurement mentor scheme because people just felt that they didn't have the capability and the toolkit to be able to do that, which I think was really interesting, that it's still very much lacking at that senior level.
Mm-hmm. And like confidence and this differentiation between male and female employees is always quite interesting because of those people that said they are not confident enough, 50% are probably just as competent and should have that confidence, and the other 50% are even above that. So therefore, it's really a way to unlock this kind of capacity in those people to really go after it. And so now that we're already in the HR part, that's a great segue because like we as a group, and I assume also the people participating agree that this is an important topic. Now, you mentioned earlier already that when people have the choice of the person with 20 years of experience and the one with the potential, they often go for the one with the experience. Like, how over just the last 5 years, let's say, did you see a change in job descriptions and what people, like put out as like a written expectation, and then the behaviors, and reflect a bit on that?
So, being very honest, job descriptions in general are pretty rubbish, if I'm honest. They're very generic. And, those typical values of a big corporate, trustworthy, loyal, ambitious, that tends to be what the behaviour list looks like on a role profile. And it's not necessarily bespoke to the procurement profession, in my opinion. It doesn't really bring out those skills that we've already talked about, like storytelling and collaboration and, engagement with suppliers. And, that's those soft skills that really give you that extra 20% edge. So I'd say no, when we haven't seen a shift. They all feel and look very similar to what they've looked like for the last decade, in fact. But I think where we've seen some change is, the type of questions that are coming through the interview process, the evidence that the hiring manager wants to see, and pulling out some of those personality traits. However, I'd say it's very much still the onus is on the candidate to reflect those soft skills, to give examples that bring those soft skills to life, and not just, like we've spoken about, focus on the savings and the facts and figures and the things that they've delivered that actually are probably technically very competent, but no different to lots of other people in procurement. Actually, giving evidence of that kind of human behavior, the human edge, and realistically the skills that take a function from being quite tactical and reactive to being strategic and value add. A lot of that is in the soft skills and the behaviors of the team and the individual, in my opinion. And so it's about, bringing that out when you're meeting with these people, and even with stakeholders, actually being able to communicate what your brand is, who you are, and what soft skills you have that differentiates yourself to others.
Yeah, and I think Neno talked about it earlier a little bit about like we can learn from marketing how to brand procurement, and I fully agree. Like, it is a brand as a function, but also every single one within that function needs to have their own personal brand to some degree and build that. And the way we show up is part of that brand. And so therefore, I think bringing it back to that example with the category strategy development and category management as a whole, like, this sitting alone and not reaching out to people, not understanding what they want, not communicating is such a miss. And probably, again, the reason why in our service we see, well, we're failing. And this is one of the things that we completely lack. Just one follow-up question on the recruitment side then. Why is that? Why do you feel that people still, even in the job descriptions, have this heavy reliance on the more functional and corporate lingo? Because I mean, like, you're working with HR business partners, and I mean, like, they should have seen that shift and transition as well. Why do they not update that? Because I remember, and I still see it, like, 15 years ago, I applied somewhere and it said needs to have a SIP certification. I was like, I don't have one. I don't care. I still apply. Didn't matter at all. Nobody ever asked me, but these things, 15 years later, they're still right there. Whereas like some of these topics that all of you just mentioned are still not there. Why is that?
I believe, and I believe this quite strongly, that the narrative about the procurement function and the profession and, where it should be and wants to be is actually very different to some of these processes that exist underneath. So whilst lots of procurement leaders do want a really strategic function that's innovative and creative and, different to the norm and not so, I guess, BAU and more flexible and agile and underpinned by technology, the way they hire, the persona that they're looking for, the type of profile doesn't really reflect that language, and if we think back sort of I don't know, 20, 25 years ago, the profession was really immature. So people came into procurement from sales and engineering and, you know, lots of other commercial function and brought that creativity in a lot of the time. Whereas now it feels very traditional at times in terms of what, you know, functional leaders are looking for and how they test capability. You know, it is very wedded in, you know, good technical skills and traditional category management, but absolutely some of those soft skills and behaviors go by the wayside in favor of that profile that is fairly standard and generic and doesn't allow the person to bring that innovation to the table.
And I also think that
who doesn't love vanilla, huh?
A lot of hiring managers like to play it safe.
Exactly.
So they like to play it safe. So if you are, for example, hiring for automotive industry, they will ask specifically for a person from the automotive industry. And people in procurement know that it is totally nonsense because these skills are transferable. Whether you are buying wire harnesses for Renault somewhere, or if you are coming from pharma, or if you are coming from FMCG, you will pick up these technical skills fairly quickly. You will get to know the industry in, I don't know, 3 to 4 months. But if you need to transition from a total introvert to somebody who leads teams, this could take you years.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed.
And it's funny because the same is true as we heard from Alison earlier. It's the same is true for the soft skills. They apply everywhere, in every function, in every company. Like, doesn't matter. So it's a good investment. Now, one quick poll question, Ian, if you wouldn't mind posting the next one. And this one is about actual how you get evaluated, because in this context, we're wondering, do you have behavioral elements as part of your personal targets? Alison mentioned the how we do it as opposed to the what for the soft skills. So we were just wondering if people have that in there, because I had it 15 years ago already, and people said, well, it doesn't matter if you deliver all of your hard targets. If you're an asshole, people will just vote you down and you will not get your bonus. And that's a very, very strong incentive. So what about this group?
It is, but I think the interesting thing that we get out of this is how we actually can. We know from many businesses it's entirely possible to have behavioural elements, training and activity in place, but it's also entirely possible to have targets set for which there is no support to deliver those targets. So I suppose the issue and challenge that many organizations have is that you can pitch a target in at people and pin it to their objectives, and then just hope that they find a way themselves of achieving it. And this perhaps is, some of the element that's in there. My interesting thought in this one was, for some of this stuff, the engagement levels or the 360-degree surveys that it's possible to do about engagement and impact of engagement would be an interesting way to go here, but it's kind of a hard one to measure as well.
Okay. Well, for me, it's definitely very surprising. I was also surprised. I think we set up the meeting in a wrong way and scheduled it only for 45 minutes. It was definitely intended to last an hour. So I will speed up nevertheless, though, for people who actually thought it was only 45 minutes. Alison, one question I had for you now, because obviously we're always saying there's a limited focus on training these soft skills. You have built an entire career on training and coaching on soft skills. So what over your career now, and maybe let's not go back 20 years ago, but just the last 10 years, did you see any shift? Did you see anything that has happened where you actually felt like, okay, here people picked up, there people dropped the ball again? Like, what is your take on that?
I think we have seen more of a shift, perhaps to shorter sessions, and therefore actually what we've been able to do is shorter masterclasses. And because they're shorter sessions, perhaps position them differently. So see them as more of a coaching session. So you've got a facilitator, somebody comes with a problem. So everybody attending goes away having solved a problem. But we've also then learnt, taught, tried out lots of different techniques and sort of done the pros and cons of, shall we try this, what about that? So I think some of it is that shorter element. We did do a soft skills, some of those masterclasses with a client last year, 4 months, and it was just shorter masterclasses, all on different, and it was only on applying soft skills into a category management context. So for me, it is that element, the shorter sessions, but perhaps more going back to what Angharad said in terms of that whole coaching piece, really. But I think we have seen more and more clients wanting that coaching, whether it's the technical that obviously can't then come without soft skills piece, really.
And I think that's like one of the things, Neno, when you at the very beginning outlined the different areas of like the face-to-face training, the learning management, or the digital virtual trainings, then the soft skills, as well as now the coaching. I think there's probably not a like you cannot say one is better than the other. It's really that connection between them where it then comes together. Because if I just sit there and read a book, then that's great for me as an individual. Others might say, I didn't enjoy that at all. And that could be said for all of them, whereas bringing them together and really helping people then make sense and apply what they've learned and what they have been taught is, I think, the part where it really then starts to be a holistic approach to training rather than just like an isolated measure. And I always feel when I hear we had to shorten it, like the immediate reaction was like, yep, shorten attention span.
I totally agree with you as well. And I wonder how many leaders actually allow their team time to practice, to get better at the training, to put it, to bring it to life, to let it percolate. Or is it just, here's an hour's training, job done, tick the box, on we go, because I don't think that happens too much.
Formal training is usually the best way to start, but the real thing comes from learning by doing, I would say. So basically, you start with formal training, then you incorporate all of these elements that you want to see across your organizational change. You want to see behavioral change within your procurement department. Then you assign these tasks to people. That they go out, talk to stakeholders, give them the tools which are a result of the formal training, and kind of, for me, this is the best way to approach it. Incorporate it into their daily routine, into their daily life, so that they cannot really escape it and that they stretch themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't know whether anybody here is interested in sport, but I often bring things back to kind of sporting analogy. If you take Federer, right? How many times did he practice his serve over a long time, and how many times did he go for marginal gains and get it slightly better and tweaked? Exactly. We're really impatient in business. We literally, we expect people to do some training and suddenly they're off. And they know what they need to do. Some of these soft skills and some of this learning can take years and years and years, and so we have to give people the time and space and support to drive those marginal gains and get better over time. And I don't think we always allow for that.
I think you're completely right there.
And I'm not sure that everybody is really willing to do that, because like it is actually an investment, and it takes energy, and it also takes a lot of setbacks, right? When somebody tells you like that's not good, that always hurts. It's always a bit painful, and so to have somebody assigned to tell you where you need to improve is obviously kind of a tough cookie to swallow for some people. But I really like this analogy, and we did a live event a couple of weeks ago where we brought in a rowing coach to talk to us about exactly how do we go from good to great and how can we become better.
Exactly right.
And some of the takeaways were like, set that one goal, don't have 15, like that one, focus on it, and then be relentless and repeating what you're doing. And I mean, if you just think of I think storytelling is a difficult one. We don't have like 100 opportunities, but active listening is something that you can practice every single day. You can practice it with your partner, you can practice it with your kid, you can practice it with your co-workers. And so therefore, like that's one where there's no excuse not to actually get good at that. It just takes, you need to set your mind to that.
Absolutely.
one last poll before we go into the final part. And the final part is going to be Alison telling us a little bit about what we can actually do. Like, this was one example of what we can do to actively practice our soft skills. But Alison has prepared a couple of more points. So Ian, if you could just launch the last poll. How important do you rate a structured learning and development plan for building soft skills, especially in the age of AI? Mark, what do you make of this now?
But I guess it's comforting to see that AI is extremely important. I guess the nuance in here is for that the percentage of important is that because structured learning and development plans don't work particularly in the organizations that you're in, or is it that the structured learning and development plan for soft skills is a problem? And that's maybe something we could look at in a little more detail there. But yeah, I think that felt more like people were thinking that's critical and important, and therefore should be something that's structured and delivered.
And I think, Neno, you mentioned earlier, like it's an important starting point. Just to rely on that is probably a little bit foolish, but because I mean, we all know, we all have asked, hey, can I have training? No, we don't have budget. What a common answer for that, right? But to have a starting point is so important so that we can have that jumping off point and focus on the things that we feel are really needed and helpful for us. So thanks for that. Thanks for the active participation. So now, as I mentioned before, the last part that we wanted to discuss, and we have like 1 or 2 questions as well that we want to quickly answer. Alison, can you tell us a little bit, based on your experience, based on the training programs that you deliver, what are the top skills that people can actively work on themselves? And which are the ones where maybe a team setting or a more corporate environment might be more helpful?
Self-awareness then opens up to communication, influencing. I suspect training needs to be for negotiation, perhaps that storytelling piece, because we need some of the what in order to understand, apply the soft skills to it, for me. So they would be the ones for me. Yeah.
Okay. And do you have any exercises, anything that people can do to actively do that?
Yeah, ones that are easy, because there is a lovely exercise that we do standing in the shoes, but we haven't got time for me to demo or even explore it. But if anybody wants to know, put something in comments and we can send you the video link to that. One for me that's really easy to do is to just go to a meeting and try not to have a talk and do that active listening that you were talking about, and just note the words that somebody's using and note what that means about how they think, because our language gives away whether we're detailed or not, whether we're motivated away from or towards, gives away so much about how we process information, and then that gives us a clue about how we should communicate with them. And I think the other thing, which is one of the quickest ways I know how to shift people's mindsets, is to do something different every day. And if you do it as a 28-day challenge, 28 days, do something different every day. So it might be that you decide to go to a museum for your meeting. It might be, because for me, just going into grey meeting rooms and expecting to come up with innovative answers without doing anything different, we're fighting against all the stereotypes and all those hard, difficult, boring meetings we've been in. So if we can do something different, whether it's go for a walk instead of picking the phone up, going for a walk with somebody, all those sorts of things get us out of our sort of autopilot, really. I call it zigging and zagging. It's the whole, we're zigging all the time. What do we need to zag and to change and I suppose if our mindset is fixed, it's what can we do to actually sort of loosen it a bit so that we actually see what's missing, because quite often we don't see the solutions because we're just looking in one particular direction, because that's the autopilot. And so just doing something different every day, doing that listening, gets us starting to look in different directions.
I'd also encourage people to use the people around them as much as they can. You'd be so surprised how many people you've worked with before that would take an active role in your development, your progression, supporting you generally. So it doesn't have to be a formal mentoring piece, but you could reach out to 3 or 4 people that have influenced you and just use them as sounding boards. You know, bring them into your confidence a little bit, you know, kind of use them to share ideas, to drive some of that innovative thinking, just to stress test things. And that ties in really nicely with what Alison said about doing things differently, because our way isn't always the best way. And often we're so stretched for time and kind of space in our mind that we do just do the same things over and over again.
Neno, what tip do you have how people can actively train this?
Actually, I liked what Alison just mentioned, is this 28-day challenge or something like that. Like, an active listening is important skill. Basically, everything else stems from active listening. So, but incorporating small changes into your daily routine goes a long way. It works a lot better than sprinkling a training session here or there, and then you forget about it for the next 6 months, and then you get another one. So basically, if you take some of these points and incorporate into your daily routine, I'll take a favorite of mine, which I've been pushing a lot lately, and this is interviewing stakeholders. It is usually very unpleasant when people start with these type of interviews. It takes them a lot to ramp up, but after a month or 2, you can see a real change that the 4th or 5th interview just runs smoothly. They know how to manage it, and you see these slow changes. I would say incorporate some of these into your daily routine and force yourself to do it until it becomes the new version of you.
And I think, I mentioned it earlier as well, but building on that, we heard about self-awareness, and self-awareness, I think, is the hardest one to work on, because, well, you just don't know what you don't know, right? And if nobody tells you, then you will never know. But there's a trick. You can also ask somebody, and asking for feedback is one of those things where, you know, it's like, it makes me laugh now, because I like, it's very simple. Like, if you're a junior or somewhat senior person, you always find somebody who's above you, right? That you deal with, that you engage, and where you feel uncomfortable potentially. To go to them afterwards and ask them, how did it go? Like, I just want to know, like, is there anything that I could have done differently? It's such a simple question, and it's so disarming in a way, because nobody expects that, especially if you're already a little bit more senior. Then people don't expect you to ask that, but it's such a powerful thing for somebody to actually tell you, oh, I like that, maybe a little bit of that. And I do that, like, I work with a lot of startups, and so therefore, you know, like, sometimes presentation or like communication, we talked about a lot. I mean, like, just to go over to a colleague and saying, you used a lot of try to think about that a little bit more and become less nervous. It's these tiny things, these tiny statements. Somebody once said to me, you never use please in your emails. And I was like, I don't? Really? And, you know, like, it became, I became aware of it, so I stopped doing it. And so it's these small things to just ask for a hint or some feedback that I think can have a massive impact on the way you behave and what you share. And especially now with ChatGPT, you could even just throw in 20 of your last emails and say, hey, what's my style? Is there anything that I can improve to come across a little bit nicer? Things like that. Don't think about like the complicated things. Do these tiny things, and I promise you, they can have a massive impact.
And ChatGPT answers nothing to improve. You are useless. You
sound fabulous. All right, so we had a question, and I think it's a fantastic question by Katja on the overall nature again on soft skills, and I believe the answer to that can also be a very good summary again. She asked if soft skills in procurement are more of a facilitation channel to reach more strategic goals than a target in themselves. How would you respond to that?
Both yes and no.
Okay. I'll start with the no and then tell me the yes. It's a more positive ending.
I mean, they're not the goal for themselves. But if you want to really, I mean, if you look at the Gartner, how Gartner rates procurement development from 1 to 5, from purely reactive to fully business partner role, then basically soft skills are the key to unlock each one of those steps.
Okay. That sounds like a facilitation.
Yeah, interestingly for me, when I was looking at some blogs I'd written, it was looking for the return on investment on soft skills. I got things like confidence, motivation, proaction, and I think they're really great goals. I want you to be more confident. I want you to be more proactive. So I think, and for me, they're all the outcomes of the soft skills. So, so I think they can be a means to an end in themselves.
Yeah. Angharad, any other perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both, to be honest with you. I don't think it's a yes or a no. It's yeah, I absolutely think that soft skills are really, really important, but it is all part of a melting pot that we all need to develop and own in order to get, you know, where we want to get to. But without them, it'd be very difficult to achieve, you know, a truly strategic function and be a strategic individual and really add the value that, you know, procurement wants to add. It's what brings it to life, frankly, in every sense.
I think that is though the nature of that question, and so that's why I had to, like, when I read it, I had this, I would have said wholeheartedly, yes, they're the kind of yeah,
The ammunition.
the grease. It's the grease
Yeah.
that keeps everything together and keeps it flowing. And so therefore I think that's also what I heard from you over the last hour about the importance, but also of how we can actually leverage these soft skills if we develop them in order to get to these more higher goals. We talked about category management a lot, obviously, in this context, and I think that's where I want to bring it back to as well. We know that if you are good at managing people, you will be more successful in actually achieving your goals, in unlocking new opportunities of how to treat your category differently. And so therefore, that in itself is such a high objective for all of us that I would say it's totally worth to invest more into training on behavioral skills, on coaching, as a kind of like imperative for us as a function. I have one parting question for you, Angharad, because now I know we're really over time. Do you think that, because we heard that people think that organizations should have a structured learning and development plan, and I assume that the focus was more on soft skills. Do you think that teams or like that organizations can differentiate themselves going forward in this world of AI by actively also pushing that they invest in those people skills when everything around them becomes more digital?
100%. I think it's an amazing differentiator, and I think it's an attraction tool. You know, procurement professionals are looking for something unique, something different. They're looking for, you know, a function that's invested in, not underinvested in, not being replaced fully by technology, and not all about technology as well, because, you know, people are getting a bit fed up of that conversation in general. It's about the, you know, the human and technology interaction. And absolutely, I think, you know, that would create a strong message and actually help to build a really exciting culture for a function.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So if you're a CPO and have just listened to that, there is one way for you to differentiate yourself and your organization from the rest in the world of noise. Angharad, Alison, Neno, thank you so much, Mark and Mark, also for having us. I really appreciate the conversation, and I hope there was something useful to you all as part of this discussion. I will share the recording as well as some further reading to go deeper on the topic after the session, probably tomorrow. And if there's any questions, if there's anybody interested, then obviously reach out to Mark, and he's more than happy to have a conversation around it. Perfect. All right. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you,
and talk
everybody.
very, very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.